Hello there, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Generation.
Andor has never been a series chock full of Star Wars Easter eggs, but I still
Doom: The Dark Ages has officially come out, and you would think the game would have blown the doors off the hinges and completely taken over the industry by now. Instead, the release of Dark Ages has resoundingly been met with a far more muted response than expected. And the question now is why? What happened? Are players rejecting this game? Did the boycott of fans demanding id Software not include things like de novo actually affect the sales, or is it something else? Let's dive into it. Firstly, the game reviewed well, and I have officially beat the whole game myself and got the Platinum Trophy for Dark Ages. Overall, I thought the game was good, but not amazing. On paper, it has many concepts that I do love in games: dragons, cosmic gods, and heavy metal music. But I think what Dark Ages promised versus what it delivered was a far safer and by-the-numbers experience than players likely anticipated. There's also the question of value that Dark Ages provides versus those of previous Doom games. Doom 2016 launched with a full campaign as well as a multiplayer mode that allowed players to fight one another, as well as the snap map feature, which allowed players to make their own levels and then upload them like in Halo 3 with Forge so that other players could play them. This led to a longevity for Doom 2016, and it always helped that it was the first game of its kind to have this new modern Doom way of playing and doing things, where it's become so iconic that plenty of other games like Proteus, Ultra Kill, and even Rage 2 are all pretty much just homages or straight rip-offs of Doom 2016. Then you had Doom Eternal, which in my opinion is probably the most complete experience of what this modern Doom trilogy has felt like so far. It was like Doom 2016 but on crack. You could dash around, rip and tear, and like Doom 2016, Eternal also has a multiplayer mode called Battle Mode instead this time, which allowed one player to play the Slayer, and then everyone else were demons, and you had to, end each other pretty much. While not the best online mode ever made, it was at least something besides the campaign. And then you get to Dark Ages, which has a campaign, and well, that's it. There's nothing else. There's no other modes that exist at launch besides that main campaign, which had me confused as to what was the plan here from the beginning with Dark Ages versus the more robust previous offerings. Don't get me wrong, okay? Dark Ages campaign is good, even great at times. I found the dragon flying mission early on when you're taking down the fortress to be a particular highlight of the game. And there's some boss battles especially that felt really good to play against, but when you compare what Dark Ages offers to the previous two games in its trilogy, it simply may not have been enough for most players to buy into, at least outside of Xbox anyways. Of course, Dark Ages is available on Game Pass day one. Its software is now also owned by Microsoft, so that was a given that it was going to happen. And obviously, because of that, Xbox players have no real reason to buy the game outright. So id Software and Microsoft would instead need to rely on PlayStation 5 and Steam players to pick up the slack to support the franchise instead. And looking at the numbers, well, it's surprisingly not looking great, and it's kind of confusing actually. Here's an article titled, Doom: The Dark Ages launches with lowest Steam player count in modern trilogy, and when you look at the numbers, it's even more brutal. Firstly, let's look at Doom 2016 Steam numbers, which hit a concurrent player count as seen here of 44,000 players at its peak. A reminder, this game is now 9 years old as of this video going live anyways. So while that number may seem low Steam-wise these days, but remember that gaming was much smaller back then compared to it is now. So this is actually a very healthy number, and obviously we know that Doom 2016 did well enough to obviously warrant a sequel and then some. I couldn't find exact concrete numbers on how much Doom 2016 sold specifically, but from what I gathered online, it sold somewhere between 5 to maybe 5.5 million copies, with some estimates claiming that it has breached the 6 million mark and then some, but again, I can't confirm any of that myself. Regardless, for a single-player game released in 2016 when stuff like Battle Royales hadn't already taken over literally everything by that point, 5 to 6 million units plus for your modern Doom game is healthy, and id Software clearly made a hit. Then with Eternal, the numbers speak for themselves, as seen here from Game World Observer back in 2020 when Eternal first launched. The game was confirmed to have surpassed all previous Doom titles in the franchise upon release. And Eternal did so well actually, it doubled the revenue and profits of Doom 2016. Although exact copies sold, again, I'm unable to find any concrete info on that one either. Regardless, Eternal did very well for id Software, while some had problems with the game. Generally speaking, the game was a complete experience. It reiterated on what modern Doom was going for, and like I said, these two Doom games pretty much revolutionized the boomer shooter genre and revitalized it and led to many clone-like games being made. A good comparison actually is From Software. What modern Doom did with its gameplay and style and movement is very similar to how From Software's Demon Souls, Dark Souls, and even Elden Rings and all of those did when it came to dungeon crawling RPGs. As we know, the term Souls-like or Soulsborne is pretty much everywhere now. There's plenty of games inspired by From Software's design releasing every other month now, it seems. So it's clear that Doom's reboot was very influential in a very similar fashion, and that's good for id Software. And looking at Eternal Steam chart numbers as seen here, Eternal more than doubled 2016's game and then some on Steam alone. Some reports even claim that Eternal made id Software roughly $450 million in revenue within its first year or two of release, which is amazing. The game also received 2 expansions, which were called the Ancient Gods Part 1 and 2, and overall Eternal was, by all intents and purposes, it was the complete package for what a Doom player would want to see from this franchise pretty much in the modern age. This then brings us to Dark Ages, and when you look at its Steam charts, the numbers are, well, they're concerning to say the least. Here's Dark Ages Steam chart numbers, which peaked at just 31,470 players, and mind you, this chart is currently displaying Dark Ages player numbers during its opening weekend. As this article here says, which is titled, Doom the Dark Ages achieved only 29% of Eternal Steam launch player count. It does paint a bleak picture for Dark Ages when you compare how it's performing versus that of the previous 2 games. If we think about it though, Doom 2016, that launched at a perfect time. Like I said, Battle Royale live service slop was present during this time, but it was nowhere near the level that it's operating at these days. Games like Fortnite right now offer entirely unique experiences for free. Battle Royale, racing cars, Rock Band pretty much, not to mention Ballistic and all the other unique modes players can make. Even got Lego and then some. I know someone will say, but why are you comparing Fortnite to Doom? They're 2 different audiences, but these days, most AAA offerings, they do tend to overlap. And Doom 2016 came out when those sorts of games were expected to be what they were at that time. People weren't as normalized to free-to-play like they are now, and switching to Eternal, it too had its own perfect storm as well. Eternal released during the COVID pandemic. People were inside, frustrated, angry, and just, mad at the world. Who can blame them? And then here came a game where they could rip and tear demons apart and shoot stuff to blow off steam, and people were inside obviously with literally nowhere to go. So naturally, people wanted escapism during this time period, and Eternal was the panacea to the bleakness of the world that was around them. And we also need to remember that both Doom 2016 and Eternal were cheaper than games are now too. And when we look at Dark Ages, it proves that maybe the industry's push for full price games these days is not going to go as they initially planned. Remember that Microsoft and Nintendo do want to raise prices this fall, meaning that Dark Ages at full price now will be cheaper than it will be this fall when it goes at, even more money at full price. But if the numbers we're getting now exist, what hope does it have then? It'll obviously be discounted if this trajectory continues the way that it's going before long. But I know others will say, well, Dark Ages is on Game Pass, therefore that's why people aren't paying for it the same way. And let's actually look into that for a second, because Doom 2016, that came out a full year before Xbox Game Pass even existed yet. And at the time, Microsoft also did not own id Software either. And when Eternal came out, it did come to Game Pass. However, it did not release day one on Game Pass, but instead it was actually 7 months after its initial release is when it finally landed on Game Pass to play. With Dark Dark Ages, however, it is the first of this trilogy that was day and date on Game Pass, which means this is the first time a Doom game has released on it, and clearly it has changed things. Because another thing that I noticed was that Dark Ages is technically the first fully produced in-house Doom game under Microsoft's wing, whereas Eternal was in development long before Microsoft had actually acquired its software, and what Dark Ages represented to me was this very safe, almost by the numbers in some instances kind of experience when compared to the previous two games. And something kept creeping into my head as I played the game, which is maybe Dark Ages was made with a similar vision as, say, the same way Avowed or the more recent Halo games were too, which is that these games, now all under Microsoft, just needed to be good enough to release on Game Pass, and that's really it. Look, I'm not saying that Dark Ages is a bad game. It reviewed similarly in the mid to high 80s like the other two games did, but having played it fully, it is also far easier than, say, Eternal, and like I said, it launched with less modes than the previous two games too. And I do think that Dark Ages should have at least opted for an optional game mode. The idea that comes to my mind is a roguelite game mode, probably. You know, something similar to what God of War Ragnarok added post-launch, which allowed Kratos to run through a Hades-style game mode, fighting monsters while getting story bits and info along the way, and then if you died, you would restart and get new upgrades, that sort of thing. And Doom obviously already has a strong responsive gameplay loop, and this would just make sense to add. Or another equally interesting game mode would have been perhaps a Space Marine 2-like operations game mode instead, where players could team up as slayers or whatever else, and then hunt demons together and level up and upgrade their weapons in an RPG-light scenario to customize their slayers. But again, none of this exists in Dark Ages. It's just 22 main missions, and that's it. Arguably, though, it then begs the question if id Software may have to some degree phoned this game in somewhat, because there's probably not much fear, I guess, of mass layoffs on performance when it comes to Dark Ages compared to the previous games. Obviously, Doom 2016 and Eternal initially required more modes and pizzazz, if you will, because there was tangible realities being formed that, let's say, if Doom 2016 flopped out of the gate, yeah, id Software would have been facing mass layoffs. And Eternal was also created with that same sort of vision in mind. Obviously, halfway through development, id Software got bought by Microsoft, but the blueprint, design, and vision were already set in stone at that point. With Dark Ages, well, their bills are already paid for. id Software can, in theory, just coast on by and kind of just, you know, make whatever they want, which is likely why they didn't feel the need to add more game modes, because regardless of the performance of the game, they'll still be here and they'll probably be fine. And I'm sure performance matters to a degree, and I wager that Dark Ages is doing great on Game Pass already, sure, but it is also a completely different scenario to what id Software is used to operating within, and we all know, despite games releasing on Game Pass, that they can and do still perform well outside of those services, well, some of them anyways. A good recent example is Oblivion Remastered. Here's that game's Steam chart as you can see here on screen. Oblivion peaked at 216,000 players on Steam, and currently, as of this video going live, has more players on Steam than Dark Ages does, despite it being almost a month old now. To add more proof to what's going on, let's look at yet another game that also launched on Game Pass day one that's doing insanely well outside of it, which is Clair Obscur Expedition 33. That game sold over 2 million copies so far, and let's look at its Steam chart too. And as you can see, Clair Obscur hit almost 145,000 players on Steam despite Game Pass having it as well. And it still has just over 100,000 players as of this video coming out, and it's been about a week and a bit away from being available, you know, to buy for about 1 month almost. So why are Oblivion and Clair Obscur doing so well despite Game Pass day one releases, but Dark Ages isn't doing nearly as hot? Well, there's another big reason, which is, of course, the price of these games. Oblivion Remastered launched at $50 American and comes with the entirety of Cyrodiil to explore alongside 2 whole feature-complete expansions, all remastered and rendered in beautiful graphics, well, despite the citizens still looking weird, but hey, that's Oblivion's charm, I guess. But regardless, the game was not a full-price game, yet despite that, Oblivion gave what can only be described as offering more content than most fully priced premium titles these days anyways. Then Clair Obscur launched at the same price point of $50 American, and having 100% of that game myself and platinumed it, I can confidently say that Clair Obscur more than justifies its asking price, and Clair Obscur also took me like 93 hours to platinum. I got everyone to level 99, I did everything, I really enjoyed that game. I also thought it had easily one of the best turn-based combat systems of all time. But again, both of these games launched at well below the price points of what is considered premium these days. Now with Dark Ages, it launched at $70 American, and yet despite it launching at a premium price point, again, reminder, they will jack the price up this fall when Microsoft increases all of their pricings too, that Dark Ages launched with less modes and with a far easier game to boot. The shield in Dark Ages pretty much trivializes a lot of the enemy attacks too, since you can safely block basically anything you want that you can't get out of the way of. And the shield has a resistance meter, so it can really block anything to a certain point before kind of, blocking and getting pushed away to the side, I guess. Which, of course, if you're not good at Doom, and hey, I'm not claiming I'm some god at it either, but if even I can completely dominate Dark Ages hordes of demons and then some, there's probably an argument to be made that Dark Ages simplified the core gameplay loop a little too much for some people. Don't get me wrong, though, I really did enjoy Dark Ages combat. I also really enjoyed flying the dragon too. However, the big robot fights, which are cool, were unfortunately also taking up entire levels at times to play through, and with already only 22 missions available, I would rather not have those robot missions, and I kind of just wanted more intricate level design to run around in and play Doom as Doom is, It just maybe feels like that Dark Ages underperformance as far as it looks so far is due to a huge variety of factors against it. It costs premium pricing yet doesn't offer the same level of content as the previous games. It's also being released not just on Game Pass but in the marketplace in general during a very crowded time period. Oblivion will definitely be a game that players are still playing since it is a big game, and Clair Obscur 2 is also pretty huge for what it is as well. And both of these games offer more content for less money, whereas Dark Ages took me maybe 20 hours at best to beat in 100%. And hey, look, I'm all for shorter games. I don't personally mind that Doom the Dark Ages was shorter myself, but I guess it's becoming clear that the rest of the marketplace may not be thinking the same way as me. And I should also state that Dark Ages did top the Steam Global Sellers list when it did release, so the game is obviously still being bought, and players, even if the Steam numbers aren't the best, are playing it. However, it is concerning when stuff like Stellar Blade, which is a year-old PlayStation exclusive, is now coming to PC soon as well. And as you can see here, Stellar Blade is currently outselling Dark Ages on Steam despite it not being out till June 2025. And hey, I get it, man. I beat Stellar Blade when it came out. I love that game. It took me somewhere in the maybe 40 to 50 hour mark probably to fully platinum the game. And I felt like what I played of Stellar Blade more than justified its price point to me, and I have no doubt that when Stellar Blade releases on Steam, it will be probably a massive success on that platform too. I expect at least 50,000 concurrent players at the very least. Wouldn't even be surprised if it hit 100,000 actually. But it's weird how Dark Ages, which should have had a similar Steam player count to Eternal at least, instead regressed so poorly like this. You would think that your third game would have more, not 1/3 what your previous game achieved in the same time frame. But maybe the industry is just vastly overestimating what people are willing to buy when it comes to the price hikes and how the whole hobby is going. And then there's this from Games Radar Plus, and it's titled, former PlayStation executive says $70 or $80 games are a steal as long as people choose carefully how they spend their money. I don't think they should be complaining. So, this comes from Shuhei Yoshida, who worked with PlayStation for decades and recently retired. The guy has been there since the beginning, and since then he has been vibing in his retirement and just doing interviews because, I mean, why not, right? But his message here feels at odds with what players want these days. Claiming that $80 or $90 a game is a steal is not exactly a luxury that most people have as an objective reality these days, because the majority of people are maybe 1 or 2 paychecks away from becoming homeless, which is terrible but sadly true for many people. And games are already, in my opinion, too expensive at the best of times, with most new releases not really justifying their price points at all. Because $70 American, which equates to like $90 Canadian for me, that's a lot to ask for your new game. And with this whole price hike coming into effect, it means that brand new games will be launching for upwards of $110 to $130 Canadian a pop over here. And Canadians are already dealing with high inflation rates and terrible housing costs, not to mention food that just keeps getting more expensive too. Look, I like Shuhei Yoshida, but I do think the guy is not speaking from an ordinary person perspective here, but that of a privileged executive instead. The guy has likely not had to buy many of the games that he plays. He was a PlayStation executive, for God's sakes. He likely could just pick up a phone and tell someone to generate him a code for any game on PlayStation that he wanted to play, and they would do it because he's their boss, obviously, or I guess was now. But whatever, the point still stands. Shuhei Yoshida hasn't really needed to buy games to a similar degree as you or me have in the past. And the reality is not everyone is living clearly off the salary of a top PlayStation executive, where he might think it's a steal to others, it's stealing already, as in robbery from their wallets. By the way, this interview is conducted by Critical Hit Games, and here's what Shuhei said as it reads here. When you look at life in general, other products in price have increased, way more than the game price, so I think it was almost too late for the video game companies to start looking at the pricing structure. I can see where Shuhei is going with this, but this argument is still moot because you can't compare the inflated pricing of entertainment and then justifiably place it against things people need to continue living. It's not a fair comparison to say Doom the Dark Ages costing 70 or I guess 80 or 90 later this year is totally fine because your chicken breast is more expensive now too, or comparing Dark Ages pricing to say your water bill or your rent or your car payment. These are things people need to actually live. And Dark Ages, like any other game, movie, or show, are entertainment. They are not necessarily necessary for the continuation of one's life. Is it nice to have new games to play? I mean, yeah, of course it is, but if it comes down to whether you should buy Dark Ages day one or have to pay your rent so you don't, I don't know, end up homeless or put food on your table, the answer is obviously simple for most people. And the reality is that I believe a lot of these executives and journalists, both of whom get free access to the media they speak on and never really have to open their wallets for games outside of the very few rare circumstances where that might happen, are clearly speaking from a privileged position here. And I think the reaction to Dark Ages and the lack of support it's getting from fans, that it tells a much different story than what Shuhei and the rest are trying to push as the objective reality. Again, no shade at Shuhei Yoshida, he's entitled to his opinion, but I don't agree with him on this one at all. Shuhei continues where he also says this: I don't believe that every game has to be priced the same. Each game has different value it provides or the size of budget. I totally believe that it's up to the publisher or developer self-publishing decision to price their product to the value that they believe they are bringing in. This is true, and like I showed you with Oblivion Remastered and Player Obscure as well, I think it's very obvious unless your fully priced premium game is something akin to Baldur's Gate 3 or something like that, the likelihood that your game succeeds at that price point is very minimal at best these days. And the games doing the best right now are far cheaper than these premium offerings, and Dark Ages, in my opinion, should have sold at best $60 American base price, not 70, especially when, like I said, it released in a crowded time and there's better games for cheaper that last longer too. And here's what one user said in that Games Radar Plus article about Shuhei Yoshida. Here's what they said: says a millionaire, the issue with the prices is we get incomplete games. If I'm gonna pay $80 for a game, then there better not ever be any updates or season pass or expansion packs I still have to download or pay for. Better get 100% of the game on day one. Don't sell me half the game for $80, then in a year make me buy a $40 expansion pack. And that's really what happens most of the time, isn't it? A lot of games launch these days buggy. Even Dark Ages has problems too. A lot of people can't unlock the Berserker trophy, which requires you to upgrade everything because the game glitches out, stopping them from the Platinum trophy. Thankfully, somehow I didn't get that bug, but it's very prevalent all over from what I've been reading prior to playing the game. I was actually dreading that trophy not popping as I played it, so when it did, I kind of just put my arms up in the air and went, oh, it worked for me. That's weird. But it's kind of sad that I was surprised about it, isn't it? Because if I paid full price, shouldn't the trophy just work as intended anyways? Why is something like that bugged to begin with? I've said this before, but what Shuhei doesn't bring up is that video games are uniquely one of the only products that I can think of where you're expected to pay 100% of the product, yet usually you don't really ever get 100% of the product up front too. In no other industry can I think this is something welcomed or normalized outside of gaming. Maybe real estate, I guess, because sometimes you gotta wait for the house to be built. Not the best comparison, but honestly that's all I can really think of. Everything else, if you buy food or a car or a TV, it just works as intended, and if it doesn't, you return it as defective. Or if the food you buy is spoiled, you complain and you get a refund because yeah, you're entitled to that. Yet with games, if you voice your discomfort that hey, this game I bought for full price doesn't work, or maybe it lacks features, you're usually just called entitled, or in Shuhei's words here, we shouldn't be complaining if a game is more money than it used to be despite quality or lack of features. We should instead just be happy that the game exists at all, but again, you have to be very privileged to think this way about games. I think what we're actually seeing is a breaking point in what people are going to be willing to spend on games in the future. And I already know people will use the Nintendo Switch 2 launch and its expensive games as a gotcha and say, see, people are willing to spend more for games. But you're going to be comparing the launch of a new console with a diehard fan base that quite literally buys anything Nintendo makes to the average player out here that doesn't play Nintendo games. And the problem with Nintendo versus other game companies is that Nintendo has beaten the concept of pay up or shut up into their fan base for literal decades. Because Nintendo fans don't know what cheap games are from Nintendo means, because Nintendo never really reduces the prices of their core franchises games, if ever. At best, you'll get like $10 off on Zelda in maybe 3 years for like 2 days, and that's it. And if the rest of the industry thinks they can somehow force that behavior onto PC and PlayStation players to act like Nintendo fans do, I'm just gonna say it, man. they're in for a rude awakening, because on the flip side, PC, especially those fans, have bought heavily discounted games for decades now. And you better have the next coming of Christ of a video game to convince these players to want to fork over $80 or $90 when they could take that same amount of money and go buy like 40 other games in total in bundles instead for that exact same price. And I think these companies are effing around and finding out here real quick that most consumers don't need to buy new games day one unless it's really, really good. Sure, okay, Grand Theft Auto 6 will sell well regardless of the price that it is, but you can't really compare GTA 6 to any other game, really, because that's like comparing a Maserati to a Toyota. It ain't gonna happen. And the truth is that the industry is changing, and so too are the customers. And the way players have abandoned or boycotted or rejected Dark Ages shows that even if you come from an established franchise like this, that, you know, charging this full premium price point these days is just not going to justify most people to open their wallets no matter what you do. As one user said on Twitter, turn Doom into Reddit Halo, series dies, they should have went biblical with the series instead of turning it into Rick and Morty mess. Imagine Doom guy fighting alongside the Archangel Michael, wasted potential. Some users would reply, here's what one said, the people who hated Eternal for not being like 2016 are now mad at the Dark Ages for not being like Eternal. Yeah, it usually works like that, doesn't it? Of course, there was cope too, as this one user said, using Steam charts again when I assume most people just use Game Pass, go cry about it. Then this guy responded with, oh yeah, well heaps of us are renting it. Yeah, not the best argument there, is it? Well, at least something Doom is selling out. The McFarlane toy version of Doom, guys, you can see on screen here, is already sold out on their website, so I mean there is interest, just doesn't seem to be translating in a way for the game at least. And we know had Doom already broken a milestone that id Software would have announced it by now, because announcing milestones usually hypes people up, and they get FOMO to check the game out to be a part of the conversation, but so far id Software is just radio silent. Has this game even broke 1 million in sales yet? This is unusually quiet of id Software to do, if you ask me. I mean, we know people will buy games if they deem it good enough, as seen here. I mean, Monster Hunter Wilds broke 10 million copies sold in just 2 months in retail. And yeah, that's a massive success, but Wilds is more than just a campaign. It has a massive, robust endgame too, which Dark Ages unfortunately has nothing like that, as Grum said here too. If Doom Dark Ages can't post AAA numbers, I begin to suspect the $70 price point for games is an inflection point. $80 to $100 later this year is going to be a very hard sell for most games, and I think we see that now. What it ultimately comes down to is this. I'm not saying that Dark Ages has problematic elements or panders or you should boycott it. It doesn't have any of that stuff at all. But this just comes down to the fact that what they offered hasn't responded in the same degree, and players are looking for just, you know, cheaper alternatives instead these days. It probably also doesn't help too that Dark Ages has de novo, and you can't turn off ray tracing on PC, which angered a lot of PC players whose PCs couldn't run ray tracing properly, which means they couldn't play the game even if they wanted to. Well, I'm not saying that Doom is dead or id Software is cooked yet anyways. I think this combination of premium price point, lack of features, Game Pass day one, and too many other just as good, if not even better experiences coming out that cost less also all pamper Dark Ages success. I do hope to see more Doom in the future myself. I think this franchise has a lot to offer still, but I think id Software needs to quickly pivot here and maybe start making more replayable Doom games in the future with more interesting modes than what was on offer here. Because when it comes to Dark Ages, there's nothing besides a skin or two to chase with higher difficulty modes once you beat the game. And besides that, there's nothing else to chase in this game at all, and that kind of sucks. I feel like I got my experience out of this game and that's it. And I have little reason to ever go back to it. I'm sure that Dark Ages will sell much more when it gets discounted, but at release right now, this may just prove that AAA gaming has some tough questions and decisions ahead of them that they don't want to answer or deal with. And maybe this mandatory price hike is probably not the best way to go about things, but did you play Dark Ages at release? What do you think of it, or did you avoid it because it's asking too much for what it's offering? Let me know in the comments, subscribe, like the video if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Activision Blizzard and Microsoft, who owns them, are two sides of the same coin that continue to pull the entire game industry into a pit of greed and darkness with every decision they seem to be making these days. Although, credit where it's due, of course, while Microsoft is known for the predatory stuff, I will admit they do sometimes release bangers like Doom the Dark Ages, which is a single-player offering that is full of content for players to enjoy. And while I'm sure Doom will be a big success for both id Software and and Microsoft, the majority of what's coming out under Microsoft's wings are, well, it's not looking great. I gotta be honest. Put it simply, fellas, these companies are getting away with murder at this point, and we all know about the price hike in games thanks to Nintendo, who genuinely thinks their asset-flipped games like Mario Kart are somehow worth $80 or $90 American at release, which is insane. Yeah, the same Nintendo that also recently told Power World devs to remove anything that makes it resemble Pokemon pretty much. It's bad, guys. But then Microsoft decided, oh, Nintendo is raising prices? Well, we might as well too, because why not? Thankfully, that $80, $90 price increase for Microsoft products doesn't actually go into effect until fall 2025. So Doom the Dark Ages, at least, is not retailing for those numbers normally. Well, not yet anyways. But the hubris of Microsoft to believe that this is a good idea is actually terrible. For a good recent example is becoming Diablo 4. Look at that game, which Activision Blizzard makes and is of course under Microsoft too, has announced a Berserk DLC crossover for Diablo 4. This is a really great crossover idea on paper. I mean, come on, Berserk is responsible for the entirety of the Soulsborne, Souls-like genre's aesthetic. From Software has made it clear that they draw inspiration from that iconic manga with their every game, from Demon Souls all the way to Elden Ring and more. So while this is great, as you can see here, Diablo 4's Berserk DLC crossover will cost you about, this is where it gets bad. This crossover is going to cost you about $150 American if you want those cosmetics in-game. Let me break it down for you how dangerously predatory this crossover is in Diablo 4. So there's 6 content packs with this Berserk DLC. 4 of them are outfits designed around iconic Berserk characters. One is a mount, and then the other is a pet. Here you can see all the cosmetics on offer in Diablo 4 for this event on screen here. It's a lot of stuff, I know, but the fact that it's retailing for basically what? Twice the price of the base game at release pretty much? That is insane. There's no defending it. Here's another picture of the outfits as you can see here, and they look great, which is another problem because it means there will be people who will just buy this obviously either way, but then you're probably thinking, well, when this sort of stuff comes out, there's usually a discounted price, right? To get it all at once instead of individually. Actually, in this case, that is impossible, and no, I'm not kidding either. You see, each outfit in this bundle goes for 2,800 platinum, which is the currency Diablo uses to buy microtransactions. So, each of these skins in American dollars equates to about $25 per outfit alone. Yes, one outfit is like 1/4 the price or more of the base game at release. That is insane. So if you buy just the outfits alone, you're looking at a little over $100 American, which in Canadian dollars puts this in the $120, $130 mark for those 4 outfits alone. My god, dude. But of course, like always, the way these companies operate, it's also predatory at the best of times too. You see, there's no actual option to buy the exact amount of platinum you need to buy what you want from this Diablo's cosmetic store pack. They have packs in their store like 1,000 platinum or 2,800 platinum. And then at its highest, Diablo 4 offers a pack of 18,500 platinum for players to buy. So if you buy this 18,500 platinum stuff that gives you enough currency to then buy the entire Diablo 4 Berserk bundle, this will also leave you with about 2,000 platinum left to buy something else from the store too, which some may say, oh, that's nice of them. Well, no, not really. You see, this is a tactic that is used and abused time and again by companies like this. There's a reason why so many live service games never actually allow you to buy the exact amount of whatever their currency in their game is called. Because if you could buy the currency you need to a 1-to-1 ratio, you would buy the thing you want and then you're good. You would then close the shop and leave and go back to playing the game or something else, but that's bad for business, which is why every bundle is skewed, as are the prices of said items too. And it's all to ensure that you're always left with just a little bit more or just a little bit less. So you may see something you like that's just out of your premium currency range that you have right now. Oh, that item is $10. Oh, but I only have $7 or $8 in that currency. Well, what's $2 extra, right? But you really can't buy the $2 you need. No, you can only buy the $5 pack instead. So now, for you to get your $2 of makeup currency stuff, they just made $3 extra because they just swindled you and you didn't even notice because the dopamine is clouding your brain. And look, everyone's done it, I know, but that's the point. And this is how companies get you to pay these weird prices and why nothing is ever really fairly simple and clear-cut when it comes to these things. It's the same reason why when you go to the
Stay,
store
just
you'll
stay
see
on
item for
that bit.
$19.99. Why not just say $20 instead? Because your brain will see $19.99, which is technically not 20 because it's a 19, and your brain will go, well, I mean, it's below $20. It says $19.99, so I guess I'll just buy it. But then when you pay, it's always over that with taxes, and ta-da, you got bamboozled again. Yeah, it's all a bunch of mind games is what I'm trying to say, and Activision Blizzard has been getting away with this kind of thing for a really long time. But the fact that you're charging effectively twice the price of the base game at launch, mind you, for these skins and bundles, is why this industry continues down this path. Because I know people will buy this. The same thing goes with the Call of Duty stuff, which is also Microsoft and Activision owned, and is yet another storefront that is just filled to the brim with bundles and weapon skins, all designed to also prey on your wallet. Fortnite, Marvel Rivals, list goes on. So many of these games all do the exact same thing. But it's always Activision Blizzard that I noticed that usually gets singled out, because while other companies are greedy too, even like Electronic Arts even, but Activision Blizzard, man, let's just say it, they are probably the greediest of them all, unfortunately. Or they're at least up there in like the top 3. Here's a breakdown a user on Reddit did for the Diablo premium currency for the Berserk stuff, and the longer you look at this, the worse it keeps getting. These people are literally getting away with murder, and nobody seems to care. It's not like this is a one and done sort of deal either. Back in 2024, Activision Blizzard sold a Godzilla x Kong the New Empire bundle in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, and I guess Warzone 2, since it's all pretty much the same thing. But anyway, except as you can see here in this article on screen, that Godzilla Kong crossover costed more than the base game it was being sold in, and I'll show you. You see, in order to get the Beast Glove in Call of Duty, you need to buy items from what's called the Titan Collection. Each bundle of this Titan Collection went for 2,400 COD points, which is about $26 Canadian a pop. But if you bought one of the Titan Collection parts, you still couldn't get the glove. No, dear viewer, you needed to up those numbers. What are you, cheapskates? Don't you people have credit cards? Stop being cheap and let me see what's in your wallet. Give me your credit card number, flip that sucker over. I need that 3-digit activation code too while you're at it. Because in Call of Duty, we're high rollers here, so if you wanted that Beast Glove to flex on other players, you would have to buy enough of the Titan Collection to then unlock the privilege of getting that glove in-game. In total, this meant you had to buy 9,600 COD points to meet the criteria threshold to then obtain your Beast Glove. In Canadian dollars, this means that you would need to spend $105.96 in microtransactions in a fully priced video game, by the way, which was Modern Warfare 3 at this time, to then gain access to this stupid glove to then use in-game as your melee weapon. That is insane. Meaning, if you see someone with this Beast Glove in-game, they spend more money buying bundles in the online store than what they paid for the entire game it released and all that. How is that okay? This is insane. But again, despite the backlash, people just kind of went, oh well, and Activision Blizzard yet again got away with it like they always do. But when you look at the raw stats, it's eye-watering how lucrative and prevalent these tactics are becoming. To prove it, here's this article from Insider Gaming, where it said that 58% of all revenue on PC alone came from microtransactions and not actual game sales or anything like that. Over half of the money made came from stuff like this Berserk bundle or the Godzilla Kong glove thing. You gotta be kidding me. And if you want a raw number to go with that 58%, it's $24.4 billion American that was spent on microtransactions alone in 2024 on PC. Yeah, this doesn't even include PlayStation or anything else. I'm sure if we tally that all up, the number would just put me into a coma upon hearing it. And only 28% of the revenue for PC gaming actually came from selling the games themselves to players. So it then stands that these companies are not only being rewarded, but it's practically moronic to not include live service microtransaction elements to your games going forward now for the rest of time. Although, as in this article here says, microtransaction spending overall was down in 2024 compared to 2023. It saw a 14% drop. And according to Newzoo and Insider Gaming, in that same report as seen here, premium games, that means fully priced video games, accounted for $19.9 billion of revenue for companies on console alone, which is almost about half of the amount of money console games made, which was $42.8 billion as well. This still means that roughly half of the revenue from console gaming as well comes exclusively from the very same predatory practices like Activision Blizzard is pushing and more that prey upon regardless. So what the hell are we supposed to do when basically more than half of the gaming industry now is making money from selling Berserk skins and monkey gloves gloves. Where does the talent and the art go then? What are we actually heading towards in the future? Well, there is a light in this suffocating darkness, at least somewhat, which is the return of the $50-$60 video game. We know that Claire Obscure Expedition 33 was a big hit. It didn't have a massive budget, and yet it still sold well over 2 million copies, and wasn't a fully priced video game that was filled with bundles double the price of the game itself. And hey, I'm really happy that Claire Obscure exists. I want more games like that within that price range and length to keep coming, and I do think there's a real tangible future for more games to come that have both smaller budgets like Claire Obscure, while also being made by smaller teams and not costing your entire paycheck to buy when they release. And another light in the darkness also comes this August in Mafia: The Old Country, which, like Claire Obscure, has been confirmed to cost $50 American or about $66 Canadian at release. As we can see here, 2K confirms that Mafia: The Old Country will be a focused single-player non-open world game that will cost much less than your Call of Duties or your Diablos. And I just want to say, thank God for that. Please, game industry, please keep going in this direction. Not only does Mafia look amazing, I am definitely playing this day one. Just look at this game, man. The fact it's not full priced and it's not open world, are you kidding me? This is all music to my ears. I don't know about you guys, but I'm genuinely sick of open world games these days. They're too big, oftentimes full of nothing, but the same recycled content and activities, and you just do the same slop over and over again ad nauseum. Maybe it's because when I reviewed Assassin's Creed Shadows for the channel, but that game's structure just kind of broke me when I played it earlier this year, because it was literally the same crap over and over again, and it never changed or evolved, and Shadows was perfectly content to just be the same game as previous ones without changing much of anything. And maybe that's why I was so happy when I played Claire Obscure, because it was level based. Sure, it has an overworld, but it's not open world like these AAA games usually are. So when I look at something like Mafia, I get happy and excited to play it because wow, you can ride a horse during one sequence or even a car. You can do stealth and shoot people, and the graphics look really nice, and it takes place in a setting that is criminally underutilized in today's pop culture, which is Italy, by the way. When was the last time you played a game set in Italy, you think? For most of you, it's probably going to be Assassin's Creed 2, right? Maybe I'm wrong, but I can't think of any other game I've played set in that part of the world. Well, I guess Brotherhood too, but same thing pretty much. So with such a unique setting, time period not being full price, hopefully not being filled to the brim with microtransactions, jury's still out on that one, and it not being open world, this is everything I want from my video games in 2025, if you ask me. The fact that technically speaking, you could basically buy Mafia: The Old Country and Claire Obscure for the price of that Berserk DLC bundle in Diablo, that tells you everything, dude. In what world can it be justified that cosmetic skins in a crossover, no less, cost more money than world-class new releases like Claire Obscure? And how the hell are games like Claire Obscure supposed to thrive or convince publishers to allow such games to exist in the future when the data tells them to make nothing but open world live service slop games over and over, and just do crossovers that make basically zero sense instead? Because why spend years making actual art like Claire Obscure when you can just sell Seth Rogen as a skin in Call of Duty? And this is why I'm worried about this, because realistically speaking, from a financial benefit perspective, there's no tangible reason why Activision Blizzard or say any other company really would want to make these cheaper alternative games. Would they be softer hits if those games underperformed? I mean, yes, but the allure of making a gazillion quadrillion dollars from your My Little Pony crossover is also just as eye-waveringly tempting to do to these types. I think, however, what 2K president David Ismailer said about Mafia: The Old Country is what I want more of. He said this: "We think there's a large audience for compelling stories that don't require massive time commitments. We're excited to offer a game like Mafia: The Old Country in our portfolio, and to provide a linear, highly polished narrative experience that can easily complement the other more persistent games our players also love and engage with on a more consistent basis." He means live service games, by the way. And God, I just want these kinds of games by the boatload. That Mafia and Claire Obscure, I mean, not, the live service ones. You know how nice it is to just play something these days knowing that you aren't going to have to spend like 100 hours of your life to beat it? I yearn for the 20-30 hour games that, don't cost me $90 or whatever at release. This is why I hope people support Mafia, because we need more games like this and Claire Obscure. Just great content that doesn't require you to sign in every day for daily challenges or live in their world nonsense. Just hit play it, beat it, that was great, enjoy it, and turn it off. That's what gaming used to be. Not whatever the hell is happening now with these prices and then some. Even Shuhei Yoshida, who worked at PlayStation for like 38 years, is concerned about these very things. This is from Games Radar, and it's titled, "Former PlayStation boss blames AAA production costs for $80 games, says titles with tighter teams like Clair Obscur could be the way forward. As Shuhei Yoshida put it here, for the reasoning why everything is so damn expensive, inflation is real and significant. But people expect games that are ever more ambitious and therefore expensive to develop. It's an impossible equation, pretty much something needed to give. It was either games needed to be less ambitious or large, or they stay the same or get bigger but cost even more. Shuhei then continues further by saying this: everything in video games today is more advanced and more technologically demanding than ever before, and therefore requires more resources. In the end, the heart of the matter lies in production costs, and that's why industry actors are so keen to diversify their revenues in order to continue producing the AAA games that the public buys before anything else. Grand Theft Auto 6 is then also brought up into the debates because after that new trailer, which you're seeing on screen now, released, and people just saw how Rockstar had people with realistic hair and even bubbles in beer bottles and animated to like painstakingly realistic degrees, dude. I mean, if there was any game that was probably worth $90 or hell even $100 plus at release, it's probably Grand Theft Auto 6. But the reality is that most companies besides Rockstar are not operating at their level, nor do they have the budget or time to take the care needed to create an experience that is just so ridiculously detailed like that is. And the truth is that most studios are one bad game release from pretty much dying. The same way that if you didn't know, about 50% of all new restaurants that open usually close within a year or two. And the reasoning is simple, because competition is cutthroat and you either sink or you swim pretty much. And when it comes to video games, how can the industry be convinced to make more shorter focused experiences that only have a single price tag attached to them, when Call of Duty and Diablo, to name just a few, are selling cosmetics worth more than entire new games? Shuhei Yoshida also spoke on Clair Obscur and all of that. Here's what he said: GTA 6 will obviously be a case in point, but if you take the example of Clair Obscur Expedition 33, the game is just as phenomenal visually, despite the fact that the team only has around 30 people. This is one of the ways forward, I think, because you can make excellent games with tighter teams and budgets without compromising quality. And I agree, I frankly think there's two big monsters in the room, if you will, that are destroying video games pretty much. One of them, yeah, that's the ideological, agenda-driven people stuff, the ones who ruin your games for political reasons and all that other nonsense. And then the other, just as destructive monster, is the greedy executive types that truly couldn't care less about the player experience, even if you tried explaining it to them. And those greedy exec types, they don't really care about winning Game of the Year or anything like that. Basically, they don't care about the art in it, if you will. Because to them, the only real benefit of winning something like Game of the Year would be to just slap that label on the cover of the game to sell more copies, so they can keep buying expensive watches and eating all the caviar they want. And none of this integrity and love for the medium matters if it doesn't equate to more zeros in the balance sheet for them. But I am glad that consumer spending, as I showed earlier, did drop about 14% since last year, and I mean good. And I mean consumer spending as in microtransactions, not buying video games or anything like that, because the less people that buy that sort of slop, the less it will happen, hopefully, in theory. I know this will never be fully eradicated, because the truth is that these live service games like Call of Duty, Diablo, and more, they all have servers to maintain to keep their games running, and you need revenue to keep those servers running by employing people. I get it. So while sure they can try to justify these insane prices as to why they're needed to keep their games running, which in Call of Duty's case, the game like runs like ass anyway, so where's that money going? That's a good question, but anyways, we're still reaching a point of no return here where the industry has got to hit some button, any button, panic, reset, even the nuke button. Just things need to change going forward. Otherwise, the gaming industry will just keep going down this very destructive path. Think about it, man. How many true single-player first-party games have come from Sony in the PS5 era alone? Let me count them for you. You got Astro Bot, Death Stranding 2, which is not out yet, Demon's Souls remake, Ghost of Yote, that also hasn't come out yet, but that's later this year, God of War Ragnarok, Spider-Man 2, Horizon Forbidden West, and Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, and oh yeah, Returnal too. That's 7 single-player video games, well I guess 5 technically, because 2 of them aren't out yet.
Hollywood is not a stranger to the concept of moral ambiguity. And, despite some of the incredible villains and anti-heroes we've gotten in the last few years, it's a narrative approach that's become wildly overdone. We've seen it in Lord of the Rings, Marvel, and of course, Star Wars. But I've noticed that we've all overlooked one of the most egregious examples of this. A project whose proposed purpose was subversion.
Very well written. It was Tony Gilroy who wrote it. It's like Star Wars for grown-ups.
It's just that with Andor, it's actually well done. Before we start, I just wanted to thank you guys all for your patience. My daughter was born just a few weeks back, and I wanted to obviously take some time to spend with family and just kind of focus on that, and took a break from uploads. But we're back. Evelyn says hi, by the way. And with all that said, let's get back to the video. Andor is a story that simply shouldn't work. A prequel show from a crippled IP about a random character from a spin-off that came out like 9 years ago. And yet, unequivocally, it's been lauded as one of the best Disney Star Wars, or really any Star Wars, stories to date. But if you compare it to the original series, or even the prequel series, Andor doesn't resemble those projects, except for its title and aesthetics. Unless that is the very reason for its success. Andor is an anti-myth, not in its ideas or philosophies, but in its approach to storytelling.
About good and evil, but heroes, what makes a hero? What's friendship? What's the idea of sacrificing yourself for something larger? They're all really basic things.
30 seconds before you
That's
attack.
very obvious,
Get
but it's
ready.
actually not.
It's often overlooked that the Star Wars franchise,
concerns you
despite
so,
its
my
name,
plural friend?
bears little to no resemblance to any other war stories.
You shall not face
Star
this alone.
Wars is an epic
Together,
space
we
opera
are a
about the
mighty
battle
force.
between good and
When
evil,
our foes fall,
about the
we
literal
shall be
chosen
left
one
standing.
and the destruction of the dark side and the Sith. And
battle starts in
while,
5,
like any good
4,
story, it focuses
3,
on the characters at
2,
hand over
1.
these complex themes,
All you need to do
it's
is
still
capture the mission area.
massive epic.
Got it?
But Andor,
Perhaps I
just
should have
more.
stayed in my
The idea of
good
ordinary
bit
people, the
longer.
idea of making a story that's in the kitchen instead of the dining room, and what do you do when history comes and kicks your door down and says it's time to make decisions?
Normal characters, normal planets, normal bad guys, and normal rebels. And because we know Star Wars as one thing, an epic space opera, for the creators of Andor to make Star Wars normal, well, it's the most unexpected thing possible. So while there are many elements that make the show Andor great, I think its writers' ability to write compelling characters without the need to label them as good or evil is what makes the show so compelling, mature, and unmistakably refreshing. One of the first things that stood out to me while watching Andor is how threatening the Empire actually is. Previously, there had been imposing figures like Tarkin, Thrawn, or Darth Vader, but every other aspect of the Empire was used as cannon fodder, a way to make heroes and villains more realistic. But in Andor, from the very first scene, we feel the threat of a galaxy under Imperial rule, the fear. And how, by killing one security officer, not even a stormtrooper, would put a target on your head throughout the galaxy. This detail is fantastic. Not only is it important that the antagonists of your story are legitimate and threatening, but in an empire that stretches all across the galaxy, ruling hundreds and billions of people, it makes sense that the ground-level forces would and should be somewhat pure. For the first time ever, we see how and why the Empire works. It's efficient, detailed, and a widespread ruling machine. And while oppression is certainly part of their systemic rule, most of the people in and working for this empire are not simply sadist, power-hungry warlords. They're people, doing their jobs and simply turning a blind eye to the evils around them. Or perhaps even believing it.
Security isn't a need. Want security? We are by secret secrets, whether they arise from within or have come from the outside.
Because the reality is, for the Empire to function, evil must be. Well, take a look at one of the main antagonists of the first season, Cyril. Cyril is a security
I'm ready to put on a show.
who works as a subcontractor directly under the Empire. He is overzealous, looking for recognition, but more importantly, looking to uphold the rules and order that are characteristic of the
Destiny
Empire.
awaits.
There's no room for doubt on the path to success and justice.
Cyril believes he is right, and his search for justice is a key component of his character. And that's why this show's demonstration of the Empire is so unique. For the most part, the evil of the Empire demonstrated in Season 1 does not come in the form of action scenes or blaster battles. It's social, it's quiet, and most importantly, it's all decided in programs. Once Cyril identifies Andor and then sets out to try and catch him in a SWAT-like raid, Andor escapes the issues by the ISP, the Imperial's equivalent of the Nazi SS. And this is where the normality of evil becomes even more apparent. You'd think this storyline would be one filled with brutality, exciting chases, and secret torture chambers. And while it has its dark moments, narratively, it plays out like an office drama.
Yes, sir. Confidence is high. He got the pilot talking almost immediately.
The Imperial masking device used is one of the items stolen from the Navy Yard in Los Ash last year.
Incredible. Apologies, we're off-site.
We expand our perspective to Deidre Mira, who is a senior officer in the ISB looking to expand her control and excel in career. And for a good part of her character, the audience is rooting for her. After all, this guy's a
I believe our sector protocol described in the ISP Code of Conduct being violated by Supervisor Nero, and that this overreach is this compromising Imperial safety to a degree that's
ready to put on a show!
And Deidre is not only better at her job, but way more likable member of the Empire. The way the show is written encourages us to root for these characters who are expressing evil. And because there is distance between them and the other examples of the Empire's brutality, we can still like them. After all, they're not evil prison guards like these guys. They're only the people that make laws that are directly responsible for the creation and propagation of a prison system like this. Wow. It's not until the last few episodes of the show that we are forced to reconcile our affection for Deidre or some of the other members of the Empire and our distinction between good space Nazis and bad. When we see Deidre actively interact with good characters, torturing them, interrogating and serving the role the Empire has always served in Star Wars, one of explicit, systemized oppression.
You're ISB, aren't you? 30 seconds before you attack. Get ready.
You're going to tell me absolutely everything you know about the Bible.
But this message wouldn't have such narrative weight if the creators were more intent on preaching it. It feels morally ambiguous because instead of telling us what to think, Andor simply allows us to think and to decide for ourselves. Characters act in all the ways they would and should in everyday life. Not cartoonishly evil, and not cartoonishly good. And speaking of the cartoonish nature of good, we couldn't address the moral complexity of Andor without talking about the rebellion. War is a nasty thing, not simply for the casualties, but for the monsters it makes men into. The things everyone is eventually asked to witness, to say, or to do. And despite the moral superiority of the rebel cause, Andor does not shy away from its reality. In fact, the arc of the titular character, Cassian Andor, addresses this concept directly. We start the show seeing Cassian as an angry man. He hates the Empire and everything it stands for, but has no real outlet, goal, or overall plan. He is simply out to protect himself and the people he loves. But after killing 2 Imperial security guards, he goes on the run. He tries to reach out to a mysterious contact looking to sell expensive spaceship parts, and is seeking to escape from the law, but ends up meeting Luthen, one of the key figures of the rebellion. And that's when Luthen asks him to join, or rather, hates him.
know you killed 2 corpus at Milano 1. I know they're coming for you. Seems like such a waste to let them out. Waste
Your
of
team's
time.
capture progress has passed the halfway point.
That's the wrong question. The right question is, how much time do we have to get out of here? Why did I do any work with you? Don't you want to fight these bastards for real?
From here, Cassian plays a key role in the massive Altamani heist, but importantly, does that entirely for his own reasons. Whereas everyone else on the team are bought into the cause, are set on fighting and perhaps even dying fighting the Empire. It's only after this heist that we see Andor's character shift when he's faced with a proposal. From a character who ironically mirrors his selfish mindset at the start of the show.
I saw the first minute you came into camp. You're just like me. You're born in a hole and all we know is
I am ready to put on a show.
Never miss.
Double KO.
There's a moon 8 parsecs from here. Nobody home.
And offers to split the earnings with him. Run away. But Andor kills him.
We're finding our groove. You've captured more than
For
half
the
of
first
the
time,
mission
we see
area.
him
Keep
sacrifice for the cause of the rebellion. And after, the final arc of the show and going to prison, this investment in the cause of the rebellion only increases so that by the end of the season, he is ready to serve the cause wholeheartedly. But keep in mind, the cause in its current state is not noble by any means. And when talking about Cassian's only true contact with the rebel cause, Luthen's Veil, the moral ambiguity of the rebel becomes even more unclear. Because Luthen is not the same.
I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy. I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make the sunrise that I'll never see.
He is the messy and unfortunate life of any, aside of Star Wars, we've never seen, and the unfortunately necessary building blocks of a greater movement. He orchestrates explicit action that, while resulting in growth for the cause, directly causes the increased oppression, torture, and death of millions. He sacrifices the little people of the galaxy for its greater good. Like I said, moral nuance at its finest. And this contrast between philosophy and action is drawn even further when we see the interactions of Luthen with Mon
30
Mothma.
seconds before you attack.
For the most part, Mon Mothma was a quiet, angelic figure who always stood as a way to connect to the original series and just the general ideas of the rebellion. Glorified fan service. But in this show, we see the depth of her character and the sacrifices she and others had to make to keep up this prestigious image, this noble cause. Mon Mothma does no sacrifice. All of them do.
All you need to do is
As
capture
harsh
the
as it
mission area.
sounds, this
Got it?
second season makes it even clearer that
Honestly,
Mon's choices
I
with
got
her
my
daughter
snow growing up.
are a failure of
Money
mother,
always tried
of
to
her
throw
duty to
snowballs with
her
me, though.
child and her family, all sacrificed for the greater good. An action that myself and I think probably many viewers are uncomfortable with, and one that raises the ultimate question: what can or should you sacrifice for the greater good?
Looks like the mission area.
Disney Star Wars has tried to explore moral nuance before, but if you look at examples of this, shows like Star Wars Acolyte, the creators subject themselves, their stories, and their audiences to their own perspectives. They don't simply show people being people, but set out from the start to tell you who is good and who is bad, even if their actions don't line up. But Andor understands the fundamentals of moral ambiguity. They write characters and allow them to be themselves and allow the story to play out as it would, even when it makes people uncomfortable.
Us against the world.
Even when the Empire looks good, or the Rebellion looks bad. But as always, I would love to know what you guys think in the comments down below. If you want to see more content, video essays on Star Wars, and just sci-fi and fantasy in general, please like, subscribe, subscribe, check out all the other videos we've created, and of course, sign up to my email list down below. And no matter what you do, keep reading, keep writing, and I will see you all in the next video.
What started as blatant shoplifting ended with assault, and it's all caught on this surveillance video. Police say these two men walked into this mobile mart with a mission to steal whatever they could fit in their bags.
Another sad shoplifting incident here in New York City, but this one's different. Because while places like Macy's now have so much security, every item is chained to the store itself, that's not the case at your local convenience stores and gas stations, which makes them the perfect target for thieves who steal for a living and aren't exactly nice about it.
New at 11, a pair of suspected robbers caught after a bodega owner trapped them inside with metal doors. The only problem, 2 employees were stuck with the suspects while he ran to get help.
This woman seen on surveillance video getting mad because her EBT card is not working. Her boyfriend comes in, confronting Alba behind the register.
United Bodegas of America installing panic button systems in 4 bodegas. The launch follows a string of violence at bodegas in just the last week.
They pulled me by the shirt and put the gun to me.
The clerk tried to lock the doors and call police. He's seen shoplifting before, but he never thought his life would be in danger just by doing his job.
The family guys always at the store working, trying to everybody.
Over the past week alone, a clerk here in the Bronx was attacked with a sledgehammer.
Just one day before that attack, medics rushed a bodega clerk and mom of 3 to the hospital after refusing to give store credit to a stranger.
It is unacceptable that we have to live in fear.
Crime is now so bad that workers in our bodegas and gas stations are demanding panic buttons. But what nobody's talking about is that articles like this perfectly explain why we now have a shoplifting problem targeting convenience stores. Because the very crooks these panic buttons are for will never go to jail. Instead, they get released as long as they steal under $1,000 worth of stuff. And they now go into stores feeling so emboldened and entitled to what's on the shelf that they'll attack anyone who tries to stop them. But here's why we now have a theft problem targeting these places. Crime in this city has been so bad for so long that your high-end retailers like Macy's are now locking everything up physically with chains and alarms that hold things to the store so they can't be stolen. If you go to a CVS, it's got wall-to-wall plexiglass restricting access to pretty much every item on the shelf. And although intense security does slow down thieves, it also forces them to look for easier targets. And you know who doesn't have the thousands of dollars needed for that type of security? These places, which used to be found on the corner of every street in town, at every gas station, and even in subway terminals. But since these are now the easiest places in town to steal from, thieves are preying upon them constantly, shutting down many of these family-run independent businesses forever. And that brings us to the real reason why we now have a crime wave targeting these places. It's not that the thieves don't want to steal from Macy's, they still do, but the problem is New York has allowed a $4.4 billion shoplifting economy to flourish, all under the umbrella of criminal justice reform. And since we don't jail our criminals anymore, this has led to the rise of full-time professional shoplifters who aren't stealing to feed their families. Nope, instead they're part of well-oiled theft operations which sell millions of stolen items online and even in the same neighborhoods where there are other stores that they're stealing from. And since many of our small businesses can't do anything about this crime wave, they've got no choice but to just sit back and let it happen. And once the thieves find a place that they can steal from, they won't stop until it closes permanently. So here we have your typical gas station convenience store. It's a mobile mart just like the one that was most recently raided. But since gas isn't really a high margin business, these places need to sell other stuff, snacks, hot dogs, hamburgers, in order to survive. But sadly, criminals have realized that these places are run by 1 or 2 people. They're basically defenseless, especially late in the evening, and that's made them the new targets in this city of shoplifters.
What started as blatant shoplifting ended with assault, and it's all caught on this surveillance video. Police say these two men walked into this mobile mart to steal whatever they could fit in their bags. The clerk noticed what was going on, but he was outnumbered.
So sadly, what you have here is completely normal behavior for criminals. They came into the store ready to steal whatever they could get their hands on. They didn't even care what it was, and they came in as a team of 2. So much for this being a victimless crime. The clerk saw what was going on and realized it could be devastating for the store. And obviously, watching the place you work at get looted is very disheartening.
months. I met my rapist on a date.
Andor Season 2 is maybe the best Star Wars we've ever gotten. It's not only breaking records critically, but fans across the board seem to love it. In a time where we've gotten some pretty disappointing Season 2s after excellent Season 1s, what makes Andor Season 2 different? Let's go through the 4 arcs of the season and see how each one contributed to one of the best seasons of television I have ever seen. Arc 1 of Season 2 has been labeled the weakest episodes of the entire series, and it's not hard to see why people may think that. One of the biggest concerns I recall a lot of people having for Season 2 was the year-long time jumps between each arc. I think people saw how great the development and pacing of Season 1 was, and were worried that Season 2 would either feel rushed or lack that development. Initially, after this first arc aired, there was a bit of a divide between viewers. A lot of people appreciated the subtleties of the arc and what it was trying to do with the characters, and others felt that the episodes would take way too long just to get to the point. The best example of this is with the Yavin Rebels. Did we really need to devote 2 entire episodes just to make the point about how unorganized the rebellion is? After watching the entire second season, I think I understand why there is so much of a divide between the viewers of this show. Andor is not an adult show just because of how slow it is or because of the mature themes it tackles. What makes Andor adult, and frankly so different from every other piece of Star Wars media, is the patience the writers are asking from the viewers. Andor is making viewers a promise that if they stick around, everything is going to come together nicely. Things that will seem isolated or irrelevant in the beginning will end up mattering and paying off. After watching this first arc after the entire season concluded, I think I got a lot more of what Tony Gilroy and the writers were going for, and that's what I want to focus on with this arc. This arc is pretty much divided into 4 different stories: Cassian and the Yavin Rebels, Bix, Brasso, and Will on Mina Rao, Dedra Meero and everything with her, and then Mon Mothma and her daughter's wedding. Someone could look at the plot progression of these arcs and say what happened in this arc doesn't really matter. We never see these Yavin Rebels again, so what was the point? We never see the TIE Avenger again, so what was the point? We never see Mon Mothma's daughter again, so what was the point of her wedding? The only thing they can point to is the planning of the Golden Massacre as a plot line that will carry over. So yes, while these plot lines may not carry over, there is so much character development in this arc that it absolutely matters. And that's the main reason why I can't call these episodes bad. If anything, I actually think they're kind of great, even if they are the weakest of the season. Andor Season 2 as a whole is about 2 things: the cost of rebellion and the cost of fascism. We see repeatedly the extent of sacrifices people make just at a chance of revolution. And we also see how even the people who benefit from fascism are tossed aside once they are no longer useful. So let's begin by talking about Cassian and how these episodes plant the seeds for Cassian's season-long arc. The season begins by reaffirming the viewer of Cassian's commitment to the rebellion. He is not only on this mission to steal an Imperial fighter, but also to potentially recruit others to the rebellion, as we see with Leia. People may ask what was the point of Cassian stealing the TIE Avenger if we never see it again after Episode 3? It's less about what Cassian stole and more about that he stole it. Cassian is not only committed to the rebellion, but he's also really good at what he does. We saw multiple times in Season 1 on both Aldhani and Narkina how good Cassian is with people. In Season 2, right away we see that Cassian is able to convince this conflicted woman what she is doing is right. When it comes to his escape with the TIE Avenger, this is clearly a very difficult ship to fly. He looks like me playing Battlefront 2 initially, but he flies it away. As we see throughout these first 2 episodes, a dozen ordinary people couldn't figure out how to fly this ship. Cassian, on the other hand, was not only able to figure out how to fly it, but he was able to figure it out while under duress. Cassian is good at being a rebel, and he's committed to it. Now, what the arc also establishes is Cassian's main conflict this season, and that's Cassian's commitment to the rebellion and his commitment to those he loves. Even though we repeatedly see how committed he is to the rebellion, he will always choose his friends and loved ones first. After being inconvenienced by these Yavin rebels and already being late to complete his mission, he still without hesitation goes to save his friends when he finds out they're in need. This commitment to his friends is what's going to be tested invested as the season progresses. And as we see, when Bix chooses to take away that conflict from Cassian, it highlights the true cost of rebellion. What did it cost Cassian? The chance at a peaceful life with the ones he loves. Now, where I do agree with most of the critics was with the Yavin rebels. I get that the point here was to not only show how disorganized the rebels are, but to contrast the rebellion to the Empire. One of the things I've learned about Tony Gilroy through his 2 seasons writing Andor is that he loves contrast. He loves to make a point about how different things are by having scenes play simultaneously. And he does that twice in this arc alone. Once to contrast the rebels and the Imperials, and another time to contrast the wealthy on Chandrilla to the disenfranchised on Mina Rao. So I get the larger message about the state of the rebellion here, but I don't think that message alone warrants the existence of this 2-episode storyline, because it doesn't really tie into the conflict within Cassian. Sure, you could argue his time on Yavin in this arc shows his competence. He was able to manipulate these guys and escape easily, but there are so many other ways you can show that. And this season alone does way more than enough to show how competent Cassian is. Where this storyline maybe could have been better was if Cassian was able to actually unite this fractured group of rebels. If Cassian was able to get them to work together by the end of his time there, then it would not only show how competent he is, but how good of a leader he is, something that Bix realizes as the season progresses. So that's Cassian's story in this arc and why it worked for me, despite my frustrations with the Yavin rebels. Let's talk about Bix. The most discussed aspects of her story in this arc are the parallels to the undocumented immigrants and, of course, the assault scene. With the migrant parallels, I always appreciate it when Star Wars tries to draw real-world comparisons politically. George Lucas built this franchise off of allegory and deep political messaging. So Andor exploring that kind of depth is definitely appreciated. With the assault scene, I was definitely taken aback by the discussion around this scene. Was it a bit jarring to hear the R word used in Star Wars for the first time? Sure. I definitely understand the arguments that Star Wars is a kids franchise, and some may not like that assault like this is shown in Star Wars. But I find it perplexing that assault is the one thing that people seem to have a problem with. I have been a champion of the Star Wars is for kids moniker for a long time. I always get so frustrated when people make Clone Wars compilations of Ahsoka cutting off people's heads and then mocking the idea that Star Wars is for kids. Two things can be true at once. Star Wars can be a kids franchise, and Andor can be an adult show. Star Wars is so wide and so vast that I don't mind them exploring new levels of maturities or genres. So Andor showing attempted assault didn't cross a line for me. Now with that out of the way, where I see the scene a lot more differently is what the scene represented. Most people seem to see it as a commentary on fascism and power, that the Empire would have officers like this guy who try to force themselves on women. That's definitely a part of it, don't get me wrong, but the impact this scene has on Bix was definitely the takeaway. Bix in Season 1 was a woman who lacked agency. Sure, she was a good and loving friend, but she was constantly a victim of circumstance. She was put in terrible positions because of the people around her, whether that be because of Cassian or because of her boyfriend Ken. When she's getting tortured and interrogated towards the end of the season, that is the result of the Empire going after Cassian. It's not her fault. And even while she is trapped, it's Cassian who has to save her. Bix never really gets to make her own decisions. One of the benefits of these year-long time jumps is showing how time affects our characters. Bix clearly suffers from PTSD from the events of Season 1, but by having this arc take place a year later rather than a week later, it shows how much stronger the PTSD is, and how traumatizing her torture was. Her arc this season is about finding her agency and overcoming that year-long trauma. This assault was so important because it's the first time Bix was able to fight back herself. She wasn't saved by Brasso, Will, or Cassian. She saved herself. This is so important towards Bix's development because, again, it's the first time she's able to take agency. As the season progresses, we see that Bix is able to heal through making her own decisions. So Bix fighting back in this scene is the first step she takes in finding that agency. I think this arc is also crucial because it shows Bix how important the rebellion is. With Cassian in Season 1, it wasn't the Primor cops going after him or even the Aldani heist that radicalized him to revolution. It was him getting arrested for doing nothing. With Bix, in Season 1 her torture stemmed from the Empire trying to find Cassian. I'm not trying to justify the Empire's actions, I'm just saying it was motivated, fairly or not. On Mina Rao, Vix's safety is threatened by a routine audit from the Empire. Nothing is forcing these Imperials to arrest Vix, but they're doing it anyway. In order for Vix to make the decision for Cassian later on that he needs to stay with the rebellion, she needs to understand how important said rebellion is, and that's what the Imperial presence on Mina Rao does for her. Dedra's story is the one that gets the least screen time in this arc. Her scene in the conference with the other Imperials is haunting to a degree we've never seen in Star Wars. The scene perfectly exemplifies the banality of evil. It's hard to explain why people sitting in a room are more evil than people blowing up a planet with 1 billion people. It's hard to grasp how evil something is when you don't see the people that are affected. In the original Star Wars, we don't see a single face on Alderaan. We just have to imagine what 1 billion dead people look like. And it's also just too quick. Tarkin orders the planet to be destroyed, and that's that. He moves on. Sitting down and discussing over lunch how you're going to implement a genocide, a plan that will unfold over the span of years, simply feels like the most evil thing you can do. What really got to me was seeing the Gorman video where we see how peaceful the Gormans are, and then after that's done, Krennic is like, we need to ethnically cleanse these people. Tony Gilroy has mentioned how he wanted to draw a direct parallel between this scene and the Wannsee Conference, the conference the Germans had in 1942 where they planned the final solution of the Jewish people. Drawing from history to enhance the Star Wars universe is what sets this show apart from everything else. No show on Disney Plus besides Andor has been able to do this. Now, how does this relate to Dedra? Again, the contrast is on display. One second this woman is helping plan a genocide, and the next she's preparing to meet her boyfriend's mom for the first time. And it appears that meeting Cyril's mom is more stressful and more of a burden to her than what she plans to do with the Gormans. It's truly sick. It's also so jarring that these scenes are genuinely hilarious. The ones with Cyril and Dedra, I mean. I cannot remember the last time I laughed so hard watching Star Wars as I did seeing Cyril laying on that bed. It's so relatable. On a micro level, it's fascinating to see how committed Dedra is to Cyril. This is the part of her arc that a lot of people are missing. She isn't simply using Cyril for her own political advantage. She does care about him. But as this show will teach us, fascism has no problem crushing the people who perpetrate it. It's the Empire that will tear these two apart, and it's the Empire that will leave Dedra rotting in a cell. So spending time here showing us that Dedra does genuinely care for Cyril makes what happens later on that much more powerful. This is just another example of the writers asking the viewers to be patient. Yes, as entertaining as this sequence is, you can't help but wonder how this is relevant to the wider story of the season. But as we come to learn, the relationship between these two is important. It's a commentary on fascism, and we'll get to that when we look at the later arcs. The last storyline of the arc is the Chandrillan wedding. Last season we saw Mon Mothma agree to sell her daughter into an arranged marriage in order to save her skin and the rebellions. Seeing the fallout of that and everything about her world crumbling apart is the most underrated aspect of this season. For someone as influential as Mon Mothma, a prominent senator, we slowly start to see how she's becoming trapped by the people around her. This arc is pretty much 3 episodes of Mon Mothma repeatedly being reminded that she has no control of what's going on in her life. Despite initially seeing how excited her daughter is, later in the episode her daughter reveals how miserable she is with this arrangement because the groom is supposedly a child. Then Mon is repeatedly threatened by her childhood friend that he will rat her out if he is not given more money. This was someone she trusted greatly in season 1, but once things got hard for Tay, he turned on his supposed best friend. Mon feels like she has no choice but to compensate Tay because the alternative is her likely execution. After Luthen confronts her about this, a man she doesn't even want at her daughter's wedding anyway, she learns that Luthen's gonna have Tay killed and there is nothing she can do about it. Right before her daughter walks out for the ceremony, Mon tries to save her one last time, but Lita completely blows her off and gets married anyway. In the episode prior to the wedding, Perrin gives a speech about using your life to find joy, that when life kicks you in the ass, it's your job to find the good in it all and make yourself happy. The camera then lingers on Mon because her life has become the the exact opposite of what Karen is preaching. She keeps making sacrifices, and life continues to beat her down because of it. There was this little detail where Mon tells her daughter how seemingly unsupportive her mother was of her when she was getting married, stating that her mother was drunk at her own wedding. After taking beating after beating all throughout these episodes, Mon can't even help herself from getting drunk, the very thing her mother did at her own wedding. Even though there's not a lick of violence shown here, and despite everything about this wedding representing high society, this Chandrilla storyline is an excellent example of how not glamorous revolution is. Mon is supposed to be one of the benefactors of a fascist regime, but her actions and sacrifices have led her to being locked in this invisible prison, a prison where she has no say over anything in her life. The ending is so perfect because even though Mon dances like a woman who has all the freedom in the world, she has never felt more trapped. As I mentioned before, Gilroy at the end of the arc contrasts what's going on with Cassian with Mon on Chandrilla. We cut back and forth between people dancing at a wedding and refugees being hunted down. While you could think of something as opposite as these two things, when you look at what the characters are going through, it's all about sacrifices made in the name of rebellion. As we'll see later on, the pinnacle of Mon's story is her speech after the Gorman massacre. This is the first time in a long time Mon is able to make a decision for herself, to do something that she wants to do. This moment doesn't hit as hard if we don't understand how truly trapped she has been throughout the entire series leading up to that point. So while I think this whole wedding stuff may have been a bit longer than it needed to be, I can't help but love the development they gave to a character that was once a simple background character in Return of the Jedi. Her crash out on the dance floor was one of the most powerful scenes this season, and that means the first arc may be the weakest of the season, but for me that still says so much because the arc is still pretty great. Let's move on to arc 2. But before continuing on with the rest of this video, only 14.3% of viewers are subscribed to this channel. So if you're enjoying this video, please consider subscribing for more content like this. Thank you. What's so great about this arc is not so much that it has any individually great scene, but that literally every character and storyline ties into Gorman in some way. This arc is the textbook example of how you develop an intricate plot. So of course it's all centered around Gorman. Before we talk about any character specifically, maybe the most admirable part of this arc is the attention to detail. I can't remember the last time live-action Star Wars devoted so much attention to detail for a culture. Actually, I do remember the last time, Andor Season 1 with Ferrix. Tony Gilroy clearly understood that the Gorman